Good evening, everybody. This is your boy D Mac. So let's talk. I've been trying to figure out an entryway or how to start this thing off smooth, but there's really no way to do it. It's just go into it. And so I'm just going to do that. Do you know when to cut your losses and go? In this world that we live in and in these turbulent times, and we have all of these toxic relationships and toxic people, how hard is it to actually detach from those relationships and move on with your life for the better? We all have been through relationship issues and we've all had breakups, and some of them have been really hard. We go through a whole mourning process, and we do a self inventory, and we look at what's wrong with us, and we criticize ourselves for the problems that we brought to the relationship, as well as the role that we played in the failure of the relationship. It's hard to do. You've been with someone for so long and you've invested so much time into that person and that relationship to try to make it work. And time again, you fail. And after a while, you just lose the zest to keep fighting. And so when you lose that zest to keep fighting, how do you then detach from that relationship and from that person? Some people do it peacefully. They'll sit down and they'll have a talk and they'll hash out everything and they'll come to the conclusion together that they need to be apart, and they will go from there. Some people will yell and scream and even come to a physical altercation, and that's the end of the relationship. Some people will some people will there's so many different ways that we go about leaving relationships, and the way that I go about doing it is very hard for me. I have detachment issues, and once I've invested so much, it takes just as long for me to let go. And so to say to someone that you're done, that you're finished, and to walk away, before that even happens, there's a lot of contemplation done. There's a lot of wondering what could happen, what ifs. There's so many what ifs that comes out of the situation. And then there's the uncertainty of where you're going to end up. Am I going to end up in a worse situation, or am I going to end up in a better situation? These are the things that go through our mind as we decide whether we're going to stay in a relationship or leave that relationship for good. Sometimes it's the best thing for us is to just cut your losses and to walk away, because there's not going to be any change made in that relationship or in those people, and they know that. And so in those cases, the best thing for them to do is to part ways. There are other relationships where people see something worth salvaging, but they just don't know how to go about salvaging it. And they will allow their fears and their anxiety and their apprehension to push them further away from each other, because they don't have the information and they don't know how to apply that information to their relationship in order to make it work. These relationships are more than just um, male and female, wife and husband, boyfriend, girlfriend. There are family relationships that has to be severed sometimes, and it's hard for you to do that because you love that person, and you, regardless of how angry you are, how hurt you are, you still see something there in that person. But if that person don't see it in themselves, there's not really much that you can do for that person until they're able to see within themselves. And so then where do you go from there? In those types of situations, all you can really do is give the person space and give the person grace and allow God to work on their heart. Or if they're going to harden their heart to God's word, then the word of God says, let them leave. But we oftentimes are so soul tied to a person that it's practically impossible for us to just let them leave. And so we will hold on to dead relationships for way farther than we should. And this causes us to become resentful. This causes us to become bitter. And most importantly, it really breaks our heart and our trust. And we take these experiences into other relationships because when you have a void in your life like that, you're going to try to find something to fill that void, whether it be drugs, whether it be a rebound person, alcohol, whatever it is that's going to give you that temporary fix, feeling better, then that's what we go for. And that really just doesn't help us much. It just does what we say, gives us a temporary moment of solace, and then it's gone as soon as that high or that drunk or that sex, whatever we did, whenever we come down off of that, we're right back in the same position as we was in the beginning. So what then can we do? We can go to God. A lot of people say go to God, go to church, and God will heal your heart and God will give you guidance on what to do. And a lot of people go and they'll seek God for guidance and they'll hear nothing. And when they hear nothing in their time frame, because God does not do things in our time frame, he does them in his own time frame, we will get impatient and we will take things into our own hands and we will mess them up even worse than they were before. This is a pattern, and this has went on throughout the ages. And we as people are still not learning from the mistakes of the past because emotions are involved. And when your emotions are involved, everything else goes out the window a lot of the times. We seek professional help. Some people will go to counseling. Some people make the effort to go and hash out everything because it's hard to sit down and talk at a person and get anything accomplished. But when you have someone to mediate and to break down what you're trying to get across, then it seems to relay better to your mate or your spouse. And so they'll go to counseling. But what happens when counseling doesn't work? What happens when counseling just can't fix the void that's in your heart? What happens when counseling can't fix the hurt and the pain that you've caused each other? Well, then in those instances, sometimes it's best to cut your losses and just go. We fear the unknown, and what is unknown is the status or the condition that we'll be in once we break away from these relationships, because oftentimes we're living together and you have to make other living arrangements. There's often times where you share different assets and you have to go about splitting up those assets. And so you have to deal with that person more than you would like to, but it has to be done in order for you to move along. And some people I've seen times before, because I used to work at a storage place, and I've seen times where people got a divorce and everything that they accumulated together, they allowed it to be sold off at an auction because both people were so heartbroken, were so angry that they didn't want anything to remind them of the other person. That's cutting your losses. When I moved to Texas, I cut my losses. I came to Texas with 7 outfits, 2 suits, and 3 pairs of shoes. I cut my losses. I left everything in North Carolina and I moved to Texas to get away from everything that was taking place there. Rebuild a life here. And even to this day, that was over 15 years ago. Matter of fact, about to be 16 years ago. And some of that condemnation from my mistakes in that first relationship still hangs over me and still affects my relationship that I'm in today. We carry baggage with us oftentimes, especially when we don't tie up loose ends and we leave the ending of the relationship open and we don't gain any closure. It's a very hard pill to swallow. And you often lose your self esteem. You often lose your confidence and your will to keep moving on a lot of the times. But I want to say to everybody and encourage everybody right now, if you're going through a situation and your relationship is not working for you and you feel like there's no other option but to cut your losses and walk away and do what's in your heart to do. Don't stay there and allow yourself to become more of what you've already become in that relationship. You need a change. You have to change. You need something outside of what you have to give you motivation to become a better person because that's what it all boils down to. It's not even about the other person or what the other person's done or said. It's about how you respond to it, and it's about how you handle the end of that relationship. So, in the midst of all the anger and all the pain and all the hurt, we have to ask Yahweh for the strength to be able to walk upright and to do the right thing to end out a relationship. It's going to hurt so much. Your heart's going to be broken so much. You're going to go through depression. You're going to have so many emotions and feelings going through in those moments. But you have to take assurance in knowing that God got you through the last problem that you went through, the last failed relationship that you went through, and brought you to this point. Now, what you've done from what he brought you out of to now, that's on you. And you have to accept responsibility for what you've done. But at the same time, you can't be too hard on yourself. And you have to start seeking a better you because if you're the common denominator in the failures of your relationships, a better you is the only thing that's going to give you a good relationship later on down the line once you figured that out and started to work towards that goal. We as men, we hold a lot of things in, we don't share, and we let it build up until we blow up. And once we've blown up, we say a lot of things that we didn't mean to say. We do things that we don't mean to do. And so our heart is just continually getting harder and harder because we're not looking to God to help us talk through these things and work through these things because of our feelings that have been hurt. So I just encourage everybody today, if you have a situation and you're contemplating leaving, I want you to think really hard about the decision that you're making because once it's made and once you walk out that door, even if you do get back with that person, things will never be the same. Y'all, excuse me, I'm outside. You can hear the dog barking at me on the other side of the fence and all of these things that are coming through to try to distract. But You know your heart. You know when it's time for you to go. You know how bad something is affecting you. You can't stay for the sake of another person. That will always destroy you. Staying for the sake of somebody else because you're just appeasing what that person wants in the moment. That's all you're doing is appeasing what they want, and it's not what you want. And you'll just continue to get more and more angry at yourself that you allowed yourself to stay after you knew to leave. The heart wants what the heart wants. You can't force anything on it. And when the heart is set on something, the heart is set on it. When your heart starts to disconnect from somebody and your feelings for somebody is gone and your emotions are no longer there for that person, and even when you think back to the good times, you still can't smile about it, you got to go. You got to go and move on with your life and allow that person to move on with their life because it's very unfair to hold somebody in a miserable relationship for the simple fact that you don't know how to detach from them. This is a common thread in our country and relationships all around the world. And so if we start to follow the truths of God and we start to follow what he tells us in his word, then we can come out of these situations not as hurt. We're still going to be hurt. You're still going to have your issues, but it won't be as bad because you will have the comfort of God and you will have the assurance of God that he's with you the whole way. Now, the people who don't have this hope, I don't want to say the word, but they end up taking their own life a lot of times because you get to such a low point to where you just want the hurt and the pain to stop. And you want that relief by any way possible. We have so much more to do in this world and we have so much more to learn. We'll learn until the day that we die. And so we don't know anything. Someone told me earlier, the more knowledge you gain, the more you learn that you don't know anything. And so we just have to carry ourselves in that manner and be humble and don't allow your emotions to push you into toxic conversations that are not going to be beneficial to a good ending of that relationship. I'm pretty much preaching to myself at this time because I've done every wrong thing that I've stated time and time again in different relationships. And I always come out feeling the same, like a dirt bag, like I'm worth nothing. But then at some point, God will touch my heart and he'll speak to me and he'll encourage me. So listen for God's voice so that you can be encouraged and not do anything that will further damage your life as it stands now. That's all I really have to say, man. Love your people, man. You got somebody and there's something worth saving. Fight like hell for it, man. It's worth it. And if you don't see anything worth fighting for, keep it moving and don't complicate that person's life any more than you already have. This is your boy D Mac. You know what I say? Sticks and stones can break your bones, but the word can always heal you. I'm out.